Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. I'm here with my good friend and co-host Jim Gurley, and Jim and I had a long discussion about a number of things while we were seeking out a topic, and what we arrived at was the topic of self-interest, and this kind of covers a lot of different areas. It ties in nicely to our flywheel of life at the center of self and of it's one of those hyphenated self words, self interest. And when we talked about it initially, we talked about it in the concept of how helpful, I guess, is a good word, that it might be before engaging someone in a conversation or any kind of engagement to understand what the other person's self interest might be and to clarify what your own self interest might be. And boy, that could spread its wings quite easily, Jim. But I'll toss it over to you and give you the opportunity to give us some context and where the topic of self interest came from and some of your thoughts on it.
Yeah, Mark, it came up recently because as we interact with people throughout the week, often when I mention that we do a weekly podcast, the first question is, well, what's the name of it? And I said, well, it's called the Imperfect Men's Club. Our tagline is "The imperfection is the perfection," which always grabs somebody's attention. And then they'll say, well, what do you talk about? And I said, well, we've created this framework. It has these 5 areas of your life. Um, no particular order. As a man, our identity and everything we are, again, high level, as our career or profession, and that in two categories of being a entrepreneur like we are versus working for a company, our health, our mental health, our physical health, our relationship with others, particularly our mothers, our girlfriends, wives, brothers, uh, fathers, and so on, and our relationship with money, our relationship with the worldview, which falls in two categories, especially in a political season of the red team and the blue team, and our worldview is our childhood, and so on. So they said, well, what is the main topic? I said, well, what we discovered is that in the middle of all that is ourself. And as a man, particularly as later on in life, self awareness becomes super important. Self awareness about how these areas in your life radiate out to all parts of your life, of those 5 areas of your life. And in the middle of that, uh, especially as you get, and that's right. The other, what I mention often is our target market, or let's just say our focus is on middle-aged men. That can include mid 30s, mid 40s, mid 50s, mid 60s. That's kind of our target market. And in the middle of that is a self-awareness. But self-awareness is directly related to self-interest. We all, as humans, have self-interest, and I think culturally we've been kind of asked not to have, or let's just say not to be as transparent as we should be, or as self-aware as we should be about our self-interest. So in recent um, interactions, do business relationships, particularly newer ones, I make it a point to establish the self-interest. Like, what are your self-interests? What are mine? I'll tell you what mine are, not in a confrontational way, but in a way that establishes what success looks like, what the end result would be desirable. It also fits into a mentality of a win-win versus a win-lost mentality. And it's again, it's how we approach things in everything in life. And I just thought the word self-interest, opens up the conversation to be a little more transparent, um, and maybe you could say honest with yourself and others, as you interact. And then of course the biggest self-interest right now is the political season we're in right now. That's just one of many. But
Mm-hmm.
but but what are your thoughts about that, Mark? As far as uh, declaring your self-interest, maybe in the beginning of a relationship, for mutual benefit, right?
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I think that I was probably coached, not in school necessarily, but in the business world, because I got into sales pretty early on, and I remember that, my self-interest was better off hidden from the conversation so that I didn't feel or they didn't feel manipulated or that I had some sort of self-interest that might be contrary to theirs. And as I've gotten older, I've discovered the value of transparency
Mhm.
and authenticity. And I think those two things, in my experience, bring credibility to the conversation.
Mhm.
However, I would say that you don't want to play all your cards all at once. You kind of, in my experience, I'm a big fan of self-interest being on the table, but do I figure out what the other person's self-interest is by asking a couple questions, or do
Mhm.
we just lay the cards on the table and say, you go first and I'll go second? I mean, it depends on how you approach it, and I think we all have multiple self-interests.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the context that you set this up on, because again, both of us, I owned a sales agency, right? That's what I did for 25 years. I represented uh, manufacturers, and I had a self interest, obviously, to promote their products, so that I could receive a commission and build a business. And I think I appreciate you went straight there, but you also start off by saying you had to hide your self interest,
I
and
was taught. I was taught to.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is exactly where I wanted to go with the conversation. Part of this is just different times, different. Yes, I think we were very untransparent. Is that a word?
Fair enough.
Yeah, and to sell in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, the whole thing was had zero transparency. It was all a self interest. It was pretty bad if you think about it. Yeah, it opens up a whole other conversation of a bygone era versus uh, was it better or worse? It was different back then, and you could say there were some things that were pretty shady as far as
Well,
not being.
you know what it makes me think of is the movie Glenn Ross, where
Tell me about it. Yeah,
Alec Bald. If you haven't seen the movie, you definitely
yeah,
have to check it out. Alec Baldwin, at the very beginning, is this hardcore sales manager just beating the shit out of these guys, and
uh-huh.
well, his pet phrase was all ABC, always be
Yeah.
closing. And
Oh man.
I think about that now, and I think to
Yeah,
myself, what I try to do now is never close. Like if I have
yeah,
to close somebody, then
yeah,
I'm not doing my job. My
yeah.
job is understanding
Uh,
what the client or prospect needs, trying to figure out whether I have what they need, and then trying to educate them on why my service or product is so unique that if you want what I have, the only place you can get it is from me. But the whole
yeah,
closing thing just leaves a sour taste in my mouth.
yeah, yeah. Wow, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I don't miss those days. That was ugly. Yeah, you got to admit there were some real dirt bags.
But we did it and we made
Oh
money
yeah, we
doing it.
did do it, and I would say, with full transparency, uh, I, I probably was doing it more than I realized because that's what we were taught. And now,
Hmm.
if you had a sales manager that was at that time calling you and asking you, yeah, oh man, I just you're bringing back some memories, and I don't miss those days at all. Those guys were
No.
just first rate dicks. Just
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think what that is that you can make money doing that and you can do that over a
yeah,
period of time, but you're never going to be doing it with the same customer. You're going to be doing it with new
yeah,
customers all the time because you're
yeah.
churning and burning. And one of the things, talk about self-interest. My self-interest now, when I'm trying to sell my coaching services to people, and as you well know, Jim, I try to coach people up in the professional development space and the leadership space, and
Mhm,
I'm trying to help people get better. I'm trying to
mhm,
help people get more out of their lives professionally and by connection personally as well. My
mhm,
self-interest is that makes me feel good on some level, right? Watching someone get better, watching someone get
mhm.
more out of life.
Sure,
That's a
absolutely.
that's a
It's
that's a very
satisfaction in.
satisfying thing for me. Very
Yep.
satisfying. And I mean that transparently. The
Mhm.
other thing is I don't want to spend my life chasing new customers. I want my current customers to be so happy with what I'm doing that they're going to tell other people. It
Yeah.
actually creates a lot less work. And when you get introduced to, as you well know, when you get introduced to a new customer from an existing customer, It's
Hmm.
pre-sold. All you have to
Yeah.
do is do some educating and filling in some of the blanks. There's no
Hmm.
convincing or closing to be had. So
Hmm.
is that selfish? I suppose on some level, but it's also
Hmm.
like everyone kind of wins in that scenario. There's no loser. There used to be losers. I win if you lose. That's
Yeah.
bullshit.
It is. It's wrong, and it's exactly the conversation I was hoping that we'd have today about a bygone era. Right? There are certain things that you know, we often look back and say, "Oh, it was better back then," but in some ways, it wasn't better. And it's also what I really like about this generation. I say this generation of 30-year-olds, you know, 30 plus. Their bullshit detectors are on high because they're not buying into that crap, and and they don't buy into traditional advertising. They don't buy into corporate mission statements. They don't. If you're not authentic, and if they don't see that, they'll just eliminate you, cancel you in a way. Maybe they go too far in some areas, but I do think it's a better world uh, when you're open about your self interest and you're transparent about what your motives are. But the one that I find that gets the most kind of surprise is when I ask him, what does success look like to you? Let's define that before we spend too much time and we get excited about the beginning stages of a relationship or what we're going to do together. Let's define a an outcome that we both can be happy with. That is a win-win. That is a very, like, you know, to your point, Mark, that's a very unusual way of doing things. You know, there's some people grow up when in order to win, you have to have a loser. I don't believe in that. I believe you can have a win-win situation, but if you don't establish those expectations in the beginning, it's going to be difficult to celebrate the accomplishment or the desired outcome in the end. So,
Yeah, I think that what I'm thinking about as you're talking is one particular time when I walked into the bank with my father and he was looking for a loan. I think it was $2,500 and it was some type of home improvement. And the president of the bank was a guy by the name of Jim Oliver. He moved on to be the operations guy for the Red Sox for a while. And this is a small town, 22,000 people, Winchester, Massachusetts, back in probably the 60s, maybe early 70s. And he walked in and said, "Jim, I need 2,500 bucks." And Jim Oliver got out his checkbook and cut him a check for 2,500 bucks and said, "Get it back to me when you can." No contract, nothing, a handshake. So I think transparency and authenticity has always been around. I just
mhm,
think back then it was a lot more unique than it is today. I think it's we almost insist upon it today, you know?
yeah. Yeah, I'll share without getting too detailed about it, but it was a an attorney, a patent attorney I was working with, and obviously we had somewhat established the budget in the beginning, and like always, you know, the budgets uh, it takes twice as long and twice as much effort and time as you anticipate, but but I also realized that if I wanted to maintain this relationship, of course the invoice comes and it's, you know, nearly twice as much as what we had agreed on.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been through this before with attorneys, so it's not my first rodeo when it comes to you know, being pissed off when you see an invoice from an attorney.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've had a couple of those too, right? Like
All too familiar with that, dude.
you go, what? This is a typo, right? Especially at $500 an hour.
Yeah.
But but I remember saying, first of all, I have to own some of this, right? There's ownership in all everything. There's ownership in how did this happen, but it was an expectation. I also realized that if I don't pay it, if I it's going to affect the relationship. So I have to make a decision. How valuable is this relationship going forward,
Mm-hmm.
to pay or not to pay it? And and it actually worked out very well. First of all, he was very reasonable by saying yes. He took right away. I took responsibility for my part of it. That I didn't understand that certain things were included in that budget and certain things were not. Um, and then he immediately started taking responsibility for it going over, but it was with good intentions, right? He put a lot of extra effort into making sure it was done right,
Mm-hmm.
and then of course he wants to be paid for his time, but he was also being transparent in that, acknowledging that he did not tell me that, and that he didn't give me the opportunity to make. That's why I said, if you give me the opportunity, then I maybe I would have adjusted the scope of the
Mm-hmm.
project. It all worked out actually, right? We worked it out, and it was kind of a win because I care about the relationship going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And because he was also honest and transparent and took responsibility for his part. Uh, so anyway, I wanted, moving forward, I'm doing that more and more. You establish what what well, some vocabulary first of all, right? I think some basic terminology and vocabulary so that you're
Mm-hmm.
using the same words and they have the same meaning. And then you immediately establish assumptions. My assumption, Mark, is that if we do this and this, then this would happen. Is that your assumption? Is that true? And
Yeah.
then right away they'll say, no, that's not my assumption. So okay, let's clear that up. And then from that point, then we can now have, okay, well, let's talk about our individual self-interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then let's talk about um, an expectation of the desired outcome. If ABC happens, then this happens.
Well, I think another thing that comes to mind when I'm listening to you talk is that we sometimes we make assumptions, right? That people see the world the way we see the world,
Mm-hmm,
and that my self-interest, how could you possibly have a different self-interest than mine? Mine is so pure and so transparent and so wonderful that you must be going along with it. I was just talking to my son about fixing some error on his car insurance so that his registration wasn't canceled. And I'm like,
mm-hmm,
well, I made a few calls, Dad, and they said it was all taken care of and I'm up to speed. And I said, did you get it in writing?
mm-hmm,
And he said, what do you mean? I said, somebody told you over the phone that this was all set, but you didn't get anything in writing. So it's quite possible that 3 months from now, you're going to get another bill in the mail and someone's going to
mm-hmm,
say, I never said that. So it's like, it's not that you can't, it's not that you can't trust no one, if that's a proper
mm-hmm,
phrase, but I
mm-hmm,
think there are certain things you can do. Let's say once you establish a self-interest, I mean, even if you establish your self-interest and their self-interest to the best of your ability
mm-hmm,
in that moment,
mm-hmm.
that's the moment, right? Then
Yep.
circumstances change,
Yep.
environments change, conditions change. That person's world could change,
Mm-hmm,
and so to assume that your self-interest is going to be that's what it is today and it's always going to be that way. I think
mm-hmm.
that there's probably a good idea to revisit that self-interest as things progress into a relationship. That's been my experience
Yeah,
anyway.
that's good stuff, Mark. Especially for your son, right? Your approach to it. It reminds me of something too. That in fact, uh, I made some notes in relationship to this topic, and it was the difference between knowledge and wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because we've lived a lot of life, it doesn't mean, and we have, let's just say, the difference between experience and outcomes too, right? So just because we have knowledge of things in our life, it doesn't mean they completely transfer over, right? What it
Mm-hmm.
does mean though is that what you shared with him, in my opinion, is that there's some wisdom that you shared with him. You're not predicting the outcome. You're just sharing your wisdom based on your experiences, uh, that that fundamentally apply to everything. Uh, but like you said, just getting things in writing, that's there's some experiences, maybe some bad experiences that you're
Yeah, I mean, a
sharing with
lot.
him. That is and the world needs wisdom. The world doesn't need more information. It doesn't need more experiences. Actually, it just needs wisdom is different than knowledge, and wisdom.
Nah, no
Yeah,
question about it. I think most of my wisdom has come from mistakes that I've made or
yeah,
failures of mine, and I think that's the way. I think that's the way I try to look at failure and risk and mistakes is like, what can I learn from this? But it's yeah,
yeah.
no, I think the world doesn't need any more knowledge. I think what we need is kind of execution. At least that's what I need is execution. I think, and
Yeah,
we can,
execution. Yeah, because you have to accomplish something. This is back to the desired outcome. I just find that when I approach somebody, no matter what their age is or what the situation is, um, I don't leave in a I don't. I try not to lead in a position of power or
Mhm.
in fact, just the opposite, right? If anything, I'm trying to lead with a position of understanding, but certainly not all the answers. And if we're not careful, we can project out this, oh, he knows it all, or even just by our, our position, our body tone, I mean, our physical presence, or even our tone of voice. Especially for people that are, let's just say, less experienced or less, then it can affect them in the wrong way as you're acting as you have all the answers and you know everything.
Yeah, yeah, nobody does.
No,
I
nobody
know.
does,
I
and if
think
you
we,
do, those are the worst humans.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Those are the people you want to shy away from. I think
Yeah.
it's as we joke about all the time. It's difficult not to get into politics, particularly in this kind of season that we're in. But I think about the some of the things we talked about in terms of what words mean, and that words have been so bastardized. I'm reflecting on conversations that I've had, and I've had this conversation with you before with my daughters about certain polarizing things, and the biggest one right now is this whole issue of abortion. And
Mhm.
this, well, what is that? When I hear people talk about that, I hear people talking about like six different things, and everyone's assuming they're talking about the same thing, and they're not. I mean, if you think
Yeah.
about that, you have you have the whole sex thing, you have women's
Mhm.
rights, you have women's control over their own bodies, you have the life of the unborn, you have religion, you have all these different things, and we just kind of smash them into one thing and just jam it down people's throats. And it's like, how come like we can't talk about, so what is your self-interest
Well,
in this
I'll answer the question.
conversation,
One here, we'll have some fun with this, Lamar. But please, sorry for jumping in, but let me answer the question. Uh, because I don't want to talk about it. Because I don't want to talk about abortion. Just because you want to talk about abortion doesn't mean I want to talk about
That's
abortion.
right.
And again, I'm not speaking directly to you about that, but sometimes we're having the wrong conversation with the wrong person. And
Mm-hmm.
just because you want I'm not when I'm not I'm being
Yeah, yeah,
respectful to you. I'm
the
using
impersonal you, I get it, I get it.
yeah, that's all. Yeah, I'm saying, and I get back to wisdom. You learn that's not going to go anywhere. If you're having a conversation that you want to have with the wrong person at the wrong time, the outcome is going to be bad, no
Yeah.
matter what it is. And back to self awareness, right? It's
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. If you're trying to jam any topic down anybody's throat, I
yeah,
mean, that's very premature. That's presumptuous. It's just like, well, how about I ask you first? How about we have a
yeah,
conversation about this? They're like,
yeah,
nah, I don't. And you've said it to me more. I think you say it to me more than I say it to you. I don't want to talk about that.
yeah.
I just don't want to talk about that. And it's like,
Yeah, I don't
okay,
have I have no self interest in that particular topic because I also know that it doesn't go anywhere, right? I have my
well,
beliefs, you have your
it doesn't go anywhere for you. It might go
correct. That's
somewhere for,
correct. That's being
yeah.
self that's my self interest, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So and so, but it's also like what you're saying to me, and this is all the impersonal you stuff, as I said, not Jim and Mark necessarily, just two
Yeah.
people. It's like if you tell me I have no interest in talking about that, and I continue to talk about it, then shame on me. That's not self-aware at
Yeah.
all. It's
Yeah,
like
totally.
even if I want to talk about it, it's
Yeah.
very clear you don't want to. So what's the upside of that conversation? Well, maybe it
Yeah.
becomes just a fight. Maybe the relationship breaks down. It's a ridiculous endeavor. It's like, pay attention, pay
Yeah.
attention. He
Yeah.
said he didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
comes up all the time.
No, I like it. I like it. Because like you said, it always comes back to self-interest, right? And these five areas of our life that we use, this framework that we use, the the flywheel of our lives is going on, and right next to this self-awareness is be aware of our self-interest.
Yeah.
And and there's
You know, I
nothing
mean,
wrong with it. Yeah.
we were joking about it. I mean, we were talking about topics, and I brought up my health journey, and at the end of that conversation, you were like, "Dude, I just don't want to talk about that." I'm like,
Yeah, like you
"Okay,
said, we well, I appreciate you acknowledging that. It's not that I don't care. I just I don't have a self-interest. I'm being transparent, right? I could pretend I care, but I care more about my health than I care about your health. Nothing
I
wrong with
get
that.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. And what I took away from it, and I could be wrong, is that you've had conversations with other people where they've just gone on and on and on about their own ailments and their own solutions and their own ideas, and you're like, shut the fuck up. I don't want to talk about it anymore. So I kind of
I
dismiss
think the imperfection
I
is the perfection in this one. Yes,
well,
yes, yeah.
I kind of took myself out of that conversation. I'm like, it's not that you don't want to talk to me about it. It's like you're sick of talking about it altogether, you know?
Yeah,
So
no, I think what I'm trying to say is I think as we get older, our self-interest of our bodies, it doesn't matter what friend I talk to, if he's, pushing 50s or 60s, eventually he's going to start talking about his shoulder, or he's going to start talking about his knee, or he's going to start talking about something, and it's not a subject that I'm particularly interested in.
Well, what's interesting, one of the things that's interesting about that is I think about it in the context of my middle daughter's profession. She's a gut health coach, and and
Yeah,
my profession, I'm a career development coach, and it's like we're both in positions where we can probably help everyone,
yeah,
but not everyone wants to be helped, right?
that's right.
So it's like and I've talked to her on many occasions where a
Yeah,
family member or a friend, I will identify, oh my gosh, my daughter could totally help you. And it's like, but she's like, Dad, if they're not ready to be helped, I
yeah,
can't help them. It doesn't matter. And I'm like,
yeah,
no, honey, I get it totally. My self-interest is helping everybody get better. But it's like that's not necessarily
yeah,
in the interest of the people that I might want to help. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like the addict, it's like the junkie, it's like the
Yeah,
alcoholic. It's like
you
you
can only
can't help
help
somebody who doesn't want to be helped.
the absolute. It's my favorite quote. Yeah, you can only help the ones that want to be helped.
Yeah.
So, but speaking of self-interest and speaking of daughters, I do think there is something I'd like you to bring up about your other daughter that's doing something that you have a self-interest, and I'll say I even have a self-interest because I like Caroline. I know Caroline. Without Caroline, she's the one that helped us start this podcast a few years ago.
Yep. Yep.
But if you could share, as we wrap up, a little bit about what she's doing, and then kind of push this out, and then maybe even put the link about her project in the show notes, I'd appreciate that. But yeah, share a little bit about what she's doing, and the background, particularly about where and when is going on, and with both your daughters. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. And it is it's related to the self-interest thing, but it's even more important than that. I think just kind of to shorten the story, both of my daughters live in Asheville, North Carolina. They've been fortunate to work for themselves, and they can work from anywhere. But right now, for the last couple of years, they've been in Asheville, and most of you listening probably know that Asheville was devastated recently by a hurricane. And I mean, devastated, like wiped out. And Asheville, they're not used to hurricanes. They had tremendous flooding. The many
I've seen the
buildings.
videos, Mark.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's literally devastating. That's
it
not an
really is.
exaggeration.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so after about a couple weeks now, they sat in their places. They weren't hurt. They were on inclines. They weren't in the lower bowl, so they didn't get flooding. Everyone lost power. Everyone lost water. Many people lost their homes. Hundreds of people lost their lives. Tragic stuff. And one of the very cool things is pretty quickly the whole country just came to their assistance, from all over the place with supplies and helicopters and everything. But they're still without clean water, and many people are without power, and many people are still stranded. And Caroline works with a couple other guys. She's a creative.
Mhm.
She's a videographer, and she works with a couple of sound engineers and video engineers and they support the local musical
Mhm.
community,
She went to
musicians.
school for that too. Just to
She
give
went to she
a
went to
brief
this.
background, her
Yeah,
background, but
yeah,
yeah, to
yeah. She went
tell a
to
little bit
the
about her. Yeah.
she went to the Savannah College of Art and Design, as did my middle child, and Caroline studied film and was a dance major. She's been creative. She's a yoga instructor. She's a
Yeah.
video producer. She's a
Super
podcaster.
talented. Yeah.
She's
Great,
very creative,
great
very
person.
talented. And one of the things what she decided to do with her partners was, while we're sitting on the third floor in our studio and the first floor of our building is still underwater,
Wow.
and all of the artists in Asheville are in limbo, projects are on hold, incomes are on hold, futures are on hold. She thought, well, why don't we take our creative capability and our equipment and start to film a documentary about the devastation and the pouring, the inpouring, and the influx of help from outside, and turn this into a really cool documentary that will
Hmm.
help not only bring attention to the devastation and therefore more help and a faster recovery, but give people that aren't familiar with what's going on there, that aren't close to it, a clear understanding of how devastating it was. And I think it's also going to end up being a breathtaking documentary because she's really good at this.
Yeah.
And so
And it's
she
personal.
it's personal. Yeah, it's personal for all of them.
Mhm.
So she set up a GoFundMe page, and I'll put the link to the GoFundMe page in the
Mhm.
show notes at the top, because I posted it on LinkedIn yesterday after I got it from her. She didn't tell me about it until I saw it on LinkedIn. And I
Mhm.
reposted it, and I got some really emotional and immediate responses of people interested in helping. So I really think there's an appetite out there for people to help. And there's so
Mhm.
many moving parts here that I think will serve people in a really positive fashion. I appreciate you mentioning it, Jim. And like I said, I'll put the GoFundMe page in the show notes. And if anybody has questions, I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Please,
I have a
please
few
reach out.
questions, Mark, just because
Yeah,
again, obviously I'm interested in it because I just think the world of Carolyn. But first of all, what's the goal? How much do they want to raise? What
I think it's 20,000.
20,000. And what do
Yeah,
they do with that 20,000? I know there's production, there's a lot to that. That's not that
yeah,
much money
yeah.
to do a full documentary, but
Well, the thing is, Caroline's had a lot of experience putting together really cool films
yeah,
for
I know
five,
that.
ten,
Yeah.
5, 10, $15,000. She's not an extravagant, she can do a lot with a little. So I
Yeah.
think she's probably, and she's also had a lot of experience budgeting. She's the person responsible for budgeting the delivery of projects in the creative space. So if
Yeah.
she thinks $20,000 is the number, it's the number. It's not,
Yeah.
not too much and it's not too little, but that's the target. And I threw 100 in there yesterday when I was reposting, and I know I pushed it over 2 grand. So it's only
Yeah.
2 days old, and they're already up a couple grand. So, and they may be higher than that today. They probably are. But
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
even 5, 10, $15 would be helpful.
Yeah, yeah. But the other thing, again, this is an American story, right? This is Americans that help another Americans that that need not just our help, they need our thoughts and our encouragement. You know,
Hmm.
to I can only imagine what it would be like. He said to walk in less than a month, right? How your world could change based on an event such as theirs. So yeah, good stuff. But if we could, let's push that. I'll definitely contribute to it, and anybody that's listening, like you said, whatever they can do.
And Jim, I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is that when you're not involved in something like this, or you're not close to it, or you're not connected to it, I think it's almost impossible to understand the emotional devastation
Yeah,
too. I mean, it really messes you up when you're displaced, and particularly if you've lost loved ones, or, it's just
mhm.
I live in Florida. I told you before, I've been through 11 or 12 hurricanes in my time, and fortunately, I've never had any quote unquote devastation, but I've been close enough to the devastation to have seen, like, people's lives just float away. They just
Mhm.
like rush away. So the emotional devastation is just as real as the physical devastation. So yeah, anything
Yeah,
anybody can do would be really appreciated. And Jim, thanks again for bringing it up. I'll pop that link in the top of the show notes, and we'll go
yeah,
from there.
yeah. And yeah, again, couldn't end on a better note as far as transparency and self-interest, right? I think this is a great example of being transparent.
Everybody
Uh,
should have a self-interest in this thing, in my estimation. Yeah.
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 All right, Mark. Until next week.
Thanks, Jim. See you, man.